Welcome. What is Titan? A no-code platform for Salesforce. What can you do with Titan? You can build forms, portals, document generation, e-signatures, maps, automation, and a lot more. Security is really important to us. Therefore, we are HIPAA compliant, PCI SSC compliant, GDPR 508, and ISO compliant. So, what are you waiting for? Schedule a demo with us at Form Titan and let us build the impossible for Salesforce.
We were just a bunch of nerdy kids who ignored the haters. We took their ridicule and we built on it. And when some of us gave up, well, we built on that too. Built resilience, built on a mission to make things a little better every day until the users came. Then the haters were VCs who scoffed at our audacity. This just isn't the way things are done. But we kept building. Users turned into teams, turned into companies, running their entire businesses on our apps. Then the software giants came after us. We weren't proven, we weren't fully featured, our radical cloud model wasn't secure. But we built on. And today, as companies adopt the cloud to move faster, teams are finding themselves slowed down by each other's efforts. The skeptics are claiming we'll never develop innovation at scale. But now, DevOps have come to the cloud, ushering in a new era of transformation. Companies can release on-demand across hundreds of environments, innovating faster with fewer conflicts and fewer disruptions. There will always be challenges. There will always be naysayers. And we'll build on.
All right, so over the next 40 odd minutes, I'll try and demystify what Salesforce Commerce Cloud is for all of you. I'll try and touch upon a few key topics which are not well understood. Unlike some of the other offerings of Salesforce, Commerce Cloud is not that well known, primarily because the entry barrier in the past on Commerce Cloud has been a little high. Salesforce is thankfully trying to change that. My name is Gaurav Khetrapal. I work as a CTO at MTX Group. You can see my Twitter and LinkedIn handles here. I'll be happy to connect on either medium. This is what we plan to cover. So as I said, we'll do a comparison of B2B versus B2C. I'll talk about mobile first because that's the direction in which Commerce Cloud as a product is heading. We'll take a deeper dive into the architecture. I'll try and unravel the MVC architecture of Commerce Cloud. And then we'll talk about two architectures that exist. So the Site Genesis architecture, which is the legacy architecture, and the new architecture, which is Storefront Reference Architecture, or also called as SFRA. There are a lot of jargons, and I'll try and spend as much time needed on each of these just to make sure that you understand the concepts. And then hopefully if we have time and hopefully if everything works well, then we'll do some demos. We'll also talk about, we'll do some demos of Site Genesis, SFRA, as well as B2B Commerce. We'll do a quick recap. And although I have questions and answers slated towards the end, but I would strongly encourage you to leave your questions at any point of time in the Q&A panel. And if you have a general comment, let's just use the chat window and try and make it as interactive as possible. So before I start, I actually wanted to thank everybody who's attending this session and everybody who's attended this event, and to the organizers as well. I think they have done a fabulous job. I think we all know that we are in an unprecedented time. Our lives have changed upside down. Nobody imagined this would happen, and to pull off an event of this scale and with such efficiency, a lot of credit goes to the audience. I know several of you have not slept through the night. You've been attending sessions and learning, and so thank you once again, and let's start. So a lot of sessions in a conference that you would attend, you would typically have people falling off, you would have people leaning on others' shoulders, and it's more so difficult to engage people in a virtual session because I really don't know what you're doing at the moment. You might be having breakfast, you might be having dinner, you might be snoozing, but I'll try and keep it interesting. And as I said, use the chat window, and that's one way we can interact with each other. All right, so a quick introduction about myself, and then we'll we'll dive right into it. I'm a Salesforce MVP. I used to be a certified technical instructor, which meant that I taught Commerce Cloud courses for several years. Einstein is one of my hobbies in the Salesforce ecosystem, so I became an Einstein champion as well. When I started off, and this was long back, 2007 was when I started off in the Salesforce ecosystem. I built my reputation as the Salesforce mobile guy. I did a lot of work on Salesforce mobile applications in the early days on Symbian, on BlackBerry, and then on iOS and Android. And that worked pretty well until Salesforce introduced Salesforce One, and kind of the whole landscape around that changed. And then the community gave me another name, which I'm not so proud about, but I'm in the India community, I'm now called as Salesforce Uncle. For the record, I'm not that old. I'm 43, and I genuinely believe that life begins at 40. So I'm just starting off. Let's now, yeah, and I don't mind that title either, as long as it makes some people happy. So let's do a quick check on who's in the audience. So all the developers in the house, if you can type it out, if you are a developer in the chat window. I presume a lot of us who are especially from India would surely be developers here. So yeah, developers are a species which always claim it's not a bug, it's a feature. That is something which is ingrained into our education. That's something which we are brought up with, and that's been my line of defense for the last 20 years. Do we have any designers or any front-end developers or UX people in the house?
You can also click on raise your hand so that we can count them, if not chat.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Rupesh, for doing that. And thanks to this lockdown all over the world, I think our style is changing. So we are all getting obese. Our overflows, especially around our bellies, are getting visible. At least that's the case with me. And our width is now just twice as much as what it was earlier. And then end users. End users are people who really pay the bills, who ask us to build all these applications. And whether you are a developer, designer, a business analyst, a QA, architect, the application that you are building is for the end users. So it's our job to make them happy. And if they are not happy, then we are not happy. And then it's not all worth it. All right. So with that background, let's actually talk a little bit about commerce. So a number of countries have been in lockdown. A lot of industries have been impacted. Commerce too has been impacted, but it also has served as a lifeline for a number of countries. If you have to get bare essentials, which means groceries, which means food items, commerce, and especially e-commerce, has been a lifeline for a lot of us. So there is no denying in the fact that even in the world of pandemics or whatnots, commerce will continue to thrive and e-commerce will continue to thrive. So I pulled in some statistics around how the world of commerce has transformed. So typically more than 50% of e-commerce traffic comes from mobile phones. There is 100% annual growth in social commerce. Social commerce is I bought something, I posted a review, or I posted it on Facebook, Twitter, on LinkedIn, and then several other people engaged in that sale. More than 50% of the in-store sales are influenced by digital. So for example, if I want to buy, for example, a DSLR camera, typically if I were to go in a store, I would look it up on certain portals, and then it would also come into play in the kind of decisions that I make. And then 25% purchases span multiple touch points. What does this essentially mean? So for example, if I'm buying, say, a watch, I would typically search for a watch either on my phone or my desktop or my iPad. And then once I've done all my searches, then I'll typically go ahead and do the purchase. So and another key factor which is not very well understood is the difference between B2C commerce and B2B commerce. And as it is especially muddled when it comes to Salesforce commerce, because a lot of people, when they say Commerce Cloud, they don't know what are they referring to, whether that's B2C commerce or whether that's B2B commerce. So let me actually explain what does it mean in a general sense, and then I'll come to the Salesforce specifics. So if you see the images, the two images, it's kind of self-explanatory. In a B2C e-commerce scenario, you as a seller are selling to the end customers, and this is typically an end user game. So for example, I want to sell out laptops, so I would be putting them on sale for a store like on a store like Amazon, or if you are in India, on a store like Flipkart. B2B e-commerce is more of a volume play, and it's your end customers. Your customers are not really the end customers. Your customers are typically distributors, retailers, and they in turn sell the products to the end customers. So B2C is more of an end user selling. B2B is more of a volume game where you are selling to a certain entity, which will then find its own users and it will send it to their own customers. Now let's talk about the specific differences when it comes to Salesforce e-commerce. So when I say Salesforce e-commerce, or when I say specifically, I say Commerce Cloud, I'm usually referring to the B2C commerce offering. Long back, there was a company called Demandware, which Salesforce acquired, and they rebranded that product initially as what was called as Salesforce Commerce Cloud, or SFCC. But typically, developers don't like to say long names, so people kind of skipped the Salesforce part of it, and they started calling it Salesforce. They started calling it Commerce Cloud. Then it started, and then Salesforce bought another company which was in a B2C commerce space. That company was called CloudCraze. This acquisition happened in 2018. And this was more of a B2B play. So what Salesforce did was they rebranded both the offerings. Commerce Cloud, or Demandware, now they started calling it as B2C commerce, and CloudCraze, which was the B2B play, is called as B2B commerce. So anytime anybody refers to you as Commerce Cloud or B2C commerce or B2B commerce, this should help you clearly identify what you're talking about and do a clear apples to oranges comparison. Let's talk a little bit about the overall high-level architecture. So at the highest level, you have the various customer interaction touch points. So there is the iPad, there are the physical stores, there is the browser, there are desktops. You can actually buy products through kiosks. You can call into the customer care centers and you can buy in products from theirs. And typically you can chat on websites or you can visit stores. So traditionally, we only had stores. There were no digital solutions. With the evolution of e-commerce, now we have stores, we have digital solutions. And typically, you also sometimes need a solution which can integrate the two. So you need an integration layer which can actually work just as well with your online solutions and with the physical stores as well. In that sense, the Commerce Cloud solution has been built with a layered architecture so that it's easy to plug in your solutions at the application layer. And of late, what Salesforce has done really well is since the Einstein platform was launched, they actually added another layer of Commerce Cloud Einstein. What that does is you can now have product recommendations. So based on my past purchasing history. So for example, if you are a newly, if you became a father or a mother recently and you've been buying diapers, then the Einstein platform would be able to predict what do you need next. You probably need a baby soap or something else. Predictive email, that's another use case. So depending on your buying history, or just by looking at your interactions of how you are navigating a typical storefront, Einstein can sense what kind of products you would be interested in or what kind of deals should we be offering you. So that has been a huge boost to the overall Commerce Cloud platform with the launch of the Commerce Cloud Einstein platform. And then at the lower layer, we have typically what we call as the model or the data layer. You typically have all the entities that you can think of in an e-commerce store. You have products, you have inventory, you have orders, you have price books. Most importantly, you have customers, people who would buy products from your store and give you revenue. There are promotions, content, and so on and so forth. And below it all, I mean, there is a platform operations layer which completes this architecture. This layer is common to all the products that there exist on the Salesforce platform, whether that's Marketing Cloud, whether that's Service Cloud, whether that's Sales Cloud. And the core fundamentals of the operations layer remain the same as well. You have reliability. The platform is 100% reliable. It's secure in terms of authentication, authorization. It's a multi-tenant framework, so it's not exclusive to just to you. There are a number of users who are using this, and the way Salesforce handles is biological segregation. And then there is a global release model, which Commerce Cloud follows a slightly different release model, but overall the thought process is the same, that everybody is on the latest release at any given point of time. Let's talk a little bit more about the overall architecture, specifically from a Commerce Cloud perspective. So you have all these data centers across North America, Europe, ANZ regions. These are typically segregated into what we call as pods. A pod is a point of delivery. So for example, if you were to draw parallels to this, Salesforce instance like a NA45 or an NA1 or an EU7 would be your pod. Then we have these pods split up into something which we call as a realm. A realm, if you again come from a Salesforce background, is equivalent to your Salesforce org. So what is a realm or a Salesforce org? It is your logical abstraction. It is your logical boundary of where you do all the work and where your customers would typically see only your data. So a realm is then segregated into two instance groups. We call them PIG and SIG, a primary instance group and a secondary instance group. The primary instance group has three servers, as we call them: a development, a staging, and a production. So these are self-explanatory, and I need not really go into a lot of details on these. And then you also get sandboxes. So in the Commerce Cloud world, sandboxes are what we call as prime property. This is where you do all your development and then you push out your changes to a staging environment. From a staging environment, you push it out to development. Development is typically also where your UAT happens. And then once everything is good to go, you push it out to production. Now, a question which comes up very often, and I've come across this question several times in the classes that I've taught or in the sessions that I've taken. I want to learn Commerce Cloud. How do I get a sandbox? As I said, one of the reasons that the Commerce Cloud education or awareness has been a little slow compared to some of the other Salesforce offerings is these sandboxes have not been easily available. So in the past, you needed either to be a specific Commerce Cloud partner or you needed to attend a training. Last Dreamforce, Salesforce announced that they are bringing in what they now call as on-demand sandboxes. What that means is similar to a Salesforce dev org, where you basically go to developerforce.com and you basically sign up for an org and it's free for your life. A similar model is now being adopted for B2C commerce. Currently, again, it's only available to, you need to become a partner, and if you work for a partner, go into partner community, search for B2C commerce partner group, and you should be able to find information. It's some paperwork, and once that is done, then you are able to spin up your own sandboxes. But again, you need a sandbox to do Commerce Cloud or B2C commerce development. And the way you currently do it is you become a partner. And again, that's, as I said, some paperwork required. And then once you have the sandbox, you start to build your websites. All right, so one of the other things which has kind of changed the world of Commerce Cloud development in the last couple of years is when Commerce Cloud development, back in the days of demand, where everything was built for the desktop. When I say the desktop, I mean computers, so desktop or laptops. But what we have seen over the last few years is there is a proliferation of smaller devices. So this slide, actually what it does indicate is there are more mobile phones than their number of laptops, than the number of tablets. There are more tablets than the number of laptops, and there are more laptops than the number of desktops. So now we are not in an age where we are just building for the desktop or for our specific screen resolution. We are in an age where we are building products which need to work on all the form factors. And there, at some point of time, mobile was a luxury. It's not. You no longer build mobile as a fraction of your end user base. You actually build applications which are mobile first. So it means it should give a first class citizen experience on any device that the user is running the application or a website on. Why is this important? I pulled these statistics from a survey that I ran across. So more than half of the people said that they would not want to recommend a business with a bad mobile site, and I mean, I'm sure everybody can relate to that. 40% would turn to a competitor's site if they have a bad mobile user experience, and 23% of adults have cursed at sites and used adjectives, which I obviously cannot use here when a site doesn't work. And I'm sure we have all been in a situation where we are trying to buy a product, or we are trying to do something on a specific site and it's not working, or it's very slow, and we curse that site and we move on to another site, and then we make that transaction. So these considerations are important, and this kind of gives me a good segue into the overall architecture of Commerce Cloud and how it has evolved over the years. So site genesis, genesis is basically the origin of anything. Site here refers to a Commerce Cloud site. This was the original architecture which Commerce Cloud or Demandware, and even before that, when it all started, it used to be called Intershop. This was the architecture which the team built, and it kind of stood well. It stood its ground for several years, and it's still standing its ground in the sense that it's not deprecated. It works well for your existing sites, but it's not futuristic. And I'll talk about why that's the case. But let's just look at what this architecture was, and then what's changing next. So what the team tried to do was they did the right thing. They followed a MVC architecture. They tried to separate out models, all the entities like customers, products, price books, everything was segregated as models. The controllers were originally built as something which we called as demandware scripts. The problem with that was proprietary syntax, not scalable, not interoperable. And then views, again, there is still a proprietary framework in the site genesis around views, which is called ISML, which is Internet Store Markup Language. Earlier, it used to be called as Intershop Markup Language. So the views are something that you write as templates. If you have come across any templating framework on the view layer, I would actually want you to type that out in the chat. So just to repeat, if you know of any templating framework at the view layer that you can use in any application, please do type it out on the chat window, and I would love to see what kind of inputs you share there. So the idea there was that a templating framework, what it does is, rather than hard coding everything into your HTML, what you do is you basically build out a templating framework. And just to give some examples, Handlebar, Django, these are all templating frameworks. And what they do is they take your template, they convert that template into dynamic HTML at runtime. That was all great, but the idea was that as you build complex web pages, the templates got bulky, the performance wasn't great, and then again, there was very little that you could do to actually improve the performance. There was another limitation of this model, that your models were not really representing a data in the true sense. So even some of the scripts that you were writing were emulating models. That is not something that you want in terms of a true MVC architecture. And then the whole idea of the MVC architecture is there should be a proper separation of concern. So you should never have your view directly talk to your database, but there were some loopholes which kind of allowed shortcuts. And as developers, I mean, we all know that we like to get the job done, even if that means taking shortcuts. So in that sense, I mean, the architecture was well thought out, well built. It kind of stood the test of time, but it's not futuristic. This is what a typical site genesis site looks like. And I'll take about 5 minutes to give you a walkthrough of this site in a little bit. But there was clearly a need. Site genesis was not scalable. It was not mobile first. So what the team did was they revamped the whole architecture, and they came up with a new reference architecture. Initially, this was called as MFRA, which is mobile first reference architecture. But that kind of caused some confusion that it's only for mobile, and that was kind of a misnomer. So they changed it to a more appropriate terminology, and then started calling it Storefront Reference Architecture, which is SFRA. So what does it do? In terms of the overall architecture, they kind of minimized all the proprietary frameworks. So instead of having your bulky ISML templates, you now have views. Instead of having demandware scripts, you now have JavaScript, which is, again, the overall direction in which Salesforce as a platform is heading, with initiatives like LWC as well. And what they did, the best part was that they actually picked up the best practices from 2000 of the biggest e-commerce implementations on Salesforce, and then they used that to create this reference architecture. The plus side of it is you have rapid customization, seamless updates, and I'll actually give you a walkthrough of what this reference architecture is and how it's different from the original architecture. And then if you do apples to apples comparison of what the MVC architecture was doing in Site Genesis versus what the MVC architecture is now doing, this is a much more true architecture. So you have the controller which is interacting with the model, and then your user is actually seeing the views, and then this is all cleanly segregated with a proper separation of concern. This is what a SFRA site looks like, and I'll show you both a SFRA site and a Site Genesis site shortly. With that, let me actually come to the demo and let's see if this all works as it is. So what I'll show you is I'll quickly log into a sandbox. What a typical sandbox looks like. I'll show you how do you do a small application development, a small reference application on B2C Commerce, and then I'll turn it over to Q&A for the last 5 minutes. So I'll just log in. So when you log into your sandbox, typically this is the interface that you will see, and it's called as Business Manager, also abbreviated as BM. And you can see that I have Site Genesis listed here. This is one of the sample applications I have in this. And then reference architecture, what I see here is what a SFRA site looks like. So before I show you SFRA, let me actually show you what Site Genesis looks like. So I'll select Site Genesis from here. I'll go to Storefront. So this is a sample site, and this is thanks to GDPR that we store cookies, and it is asking me if I consent to allowing my data to be stored, which I'm completely okay with. So this is what a typical Site Genesis site looks like. You have your navigation categories. Within those categories, you have subcategories, and within those subcategories, you have products. So for example, let me go to a specific category. I'll go to electronics. And this, what I'm doing right now is drilling down into a specific category, and let me look at PlayStation 3. I have plenty of time during the lockdown period, so why not make the most of it? So, and this, what we typically look at when we look at a product, we are saying that this is a product detail page. And again, if you are in the Commerce Cloud development journey, you might hear an acronym called PDP, which typically refers to a product detail page. So typically you'll have all the product information here. You'll have product images, you'll have the pricing, you'll have what kind of warranty it has, and then you'll typically see an add to cart button. And you can correlate this to any e-commerce site that you use, whether that's Amazon, whether that's any other site. What are the other things which I can do? So in e-commerce, we have a term called surgical shoppers. So unlike window shoppers, you typically have surgical shoppers who are very interested in only the product that they want. So surgical in the sense that they are very surgical in their approach. They'll come to a site, they'll not mess around. So for example, I need a laptop bag. I'll just come here and I'll search. And rather than getting to a particular product search, I just select the product I want, I add to cart, I check out, and I'm done. So this is typically what is referred to as surgical shopper. And then a lot of things that you can do is you can register on a particular portal, and then you can, whatever I'm doing right now is as a guest user. I have not logged into the site, and you can register, and then you can log in, and you can do a fully authenticated user experience as well. Let me show you what a cart looks like. Again, you will be able to draw parallels. Some of the products that I added here, again, I added this. And then some of the products which I had earlier there, as well as the laptop bag. And typically e-commerce operations, if you have a coupon code, who doesn't love discounts, and then you can typically do a checkout. And again, on the checkout, Commerce Cloud does support a number of payment mechanisms. So if I continue as guest, it will prompt me for my address, for my shipping method, and then it will allow me to continue to billing. It will show me all the options that I have in terms of credit card, PayPal, and all those stuff. What I do want to show you is some developer tools which are very handy. So let me just go to the home page. And once you develop a site, we have this particular toolkit, which we call as a Storefront Toolkit. This is a Commerce Cloud developer's best friend. So you can actually look at a specific page and you can actually see which view, which controller is it referring to. You can actually view content information. We have something called content slots. So for example, this is a carousel. I want to see what images are being served and where is this being served from. I can do that. I can actually see what content is being cached for how long, because any e-commerce site that you look at, especially the B2C commerce site, they use caching very heavily. The reason for doing that is there are millions of users trying to access that site at any point of time. And there are a number of pages which are static in that sense that it will not change the content. So for example, a menu, an about us, or a contact us page. So it makes a lot of sense to cache those pages. And Commerce Cloud as a platform has a lot of sophisticated caching built in as well. And there is also one more, which is request log, which is a little more advanced concept. So anytime you do certain development and you're firing controllers and you're not able to figure out what kind of errors you are getting, you can typically look at the request log. If you come from a Java background, this is what a stack trace looks like. And it actually points out your error to the specific line number as well. So for example, here my specific error is some UUID is null for a specific controller, which is in util reporting report checkout. So these are some certain small tips which will definitely help you when you begin your Commerce Cloud development journey. Let me show you around a little bit or more on the business manager. So anything that you see under merchant tools is typically what a merchant would do. A merchant is somebody who would come and populate what kind of products are shown on your storefront, what kind of categories show up, and what kind of payment methods you want to do. So if I were to just show you a few things, and this is analogous to, you can draw parallels with the Salesforce product, with the Salesforce data model as well. So for example, if I want to look at what kind of products I have, I can see all the products that I have in my storefront. And again, if I want to search for a specific product here, I can do that from the business manager interface, and I can look at all the products here. A number of things which I can do. I can configure SEO, I can configure analytics for my site, I can localize my site for specific languages, I can build dictionaries. So for example, typically a customer would come in and they would, even if they want to buy something, they might enter a synonym. I can specify what kind of search phrases should translate to what kind of business rules. I can do all of that. And then I can do a number of redirections as well. So for example, if I want to redirect, if I have specific categories of customers logging into my site, so for example, high volume customers or customers who are like Amazon Prime customers, I could redirect them to specific pages which can offer them more discounts. A lot of things which I can configure. The second menu option that we have here is administration, which is more for development and developers, and for admins. You can manage all the sites that you have. You can configure background jobs. You can build integrations using OCAPI interfaces, and you can do all the configurations here. And then you can do a lot of administrative stuff around the users, the roles and permissions. A lot of advanced functionality. One important thing that you can do from here is, which I would want to show, is you can actually do some benchmarking, and you can actually do some debugging as well. Before I do that, let me actually show you what a storefront reference architecture site looks like. So
quick time check, 2 minutes to go.
All right, so I'll just show you what a storefront reference architecture site looks like. So this is a comparison to the SFRA site. You can see it's a very sleek experience. And if I were to use some of my developer tools, okay, for some reason it's not launching, but anyway, let me actually show it to you by just, so if you can see here, I'm actually resizing this site. And what is actually happening is it's a fully responsive experience. And if I do it all the way, then again, it's fully responsive. And overall, the user experience is much better as compared to this site, which was the older site and which was not responsive. So in interest of time, I'll just come back to my presentation and talk about one of the topics which is very important and which would probably be of a lot of interest to you. How do you learn Commerce Cloud? Just search Commerce Cloud Development Center on Google, and it's a very elaborative site, all documentation, a number of tutorials. Start going through that, and that's a great start. Some case studies, some of the most well-known Commerce Cloud case studies. Puma is a site which is running in multiple regions and geographies based on Commerce Cloud. A lot of the other names are primarily based out of either EMEA region or the AMER region. One important topic is how do you actually prepare for certifications and how do you get certified on these. So B2B Commerce, it's a completely different track, but the two certifications there are B2B Commerce accredited administrator and accredited developer, B2C Commerce developer, and B2C Commerce architect. I do want to point it out here that these 4 certifications, and I'm not making this up, these are 4 of the toughest certifications anywhere in the Salesforce ecosystem. So out of the 34 odd certifications, these 4 are the toughest. Again, the reasons for that, those are many, that it's a high entry barrier to these ecosystems and not a lot of public information, but also the fact that you actually need to know your stuff to pass these certifications. So I highly recommend that if you are on either of these journeys, take a lot of time to prepare, take a lot of time to practice, and then appear for these exams. Some references, and I'll share this deck shortly as well. This is what we covered. And if there are questions, I can take them now. So
yeah, I can walk you through the questions, Gaurav.
Sure.
So first of all, thanks for this very informative session. I know there are a lot of questions which have come up on how to get started. I think you briefly covered them throughout your session on how to get started on Commerce Cloud. I'll ask some of the specific questions which have come up. So Salesforce has introduced new high volume license commerce portal. Is it related to Commerce Cloud?
This is indeed related to Commerce Cloud. I believe there is not a lot of public information available on this, but yeah, so a lot of what you are seeing in terms of changes in the overall ecosystem are related to cross cloud, because this specific license is related to the fact that if you have an existing customer who had Salesforce and they are launching a commerce portal, so similar to how you have a customer community license and a community plus license, this is a similar license but specific to Commerce Cloud portals.
Okay. The next one is the overall architecture that you explained around site genesis and SFRA. Is it covering only B2C
Correct.
aspect, or it covers
Correct.
both the aspects?
No, this is only specific to B2C commerce or
okay.
SFCC, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Correct.
Okay. So the on-demand Commerce Cloud Sandbox, which was announced in DF, do you know it is available right now for partners, or it's still?
It is indeed available. As I said, you need to go on partner community and search for a community called on-demand B2C sandboxes. And if you are a partner, they will allow you in that community. If you are a B2C partner, they will allow you in that community, and then you should be able to find the information there and spin up your own sandboxes.
Any insights around licensing involved on Commerce Cloud?
So Salesforce Commerce Cloud actually follows a different licensing model. I'm not sure if the question is specifically for end user licensing. So your users do not need a license. You do need a product license, but for users, it works very similar to a public facing website. They basically come to your site and they register on the site. I do want to point out one thing, that if you are planning to launch a site on Commerce Cloud or B2C Commerce, the way it works is rather than having just license and Salesforce taking a fee on those licenses, this is more of a transaction-based model where Salesforce will actually ask you what is the number of transactions that you expect on a per month basis, and then they take a revenue cut or a percentage cut or a commission cut on those rather than charge you for those licenses. So in that sense, that licensing model is different from the core Salesforce model.
All right. I think you
Rupesh,
covered this one. Difference between Commerce Cloud and Cloud Craze.
yeah, so one is B2C and another is B2B. One difference which I did not probably emphasize enough earlier was B2B or the Cloud Craze is a managed package on Salesforce. So anytime you are doing B2B development, you would probably still be using Apex, Visual Force, the core data model. B2C is a completely different product. The full stack here is JavaScript and Node.js. Everything is JavaScript. Um, and as I said, the old reference architecture, which was Site Genesis, used ISML, it used a lot of proprietary demandware scripts, but the new architecture is mostly all open source technologies centered around JavaScript.
Okay. An extension to that answer, is there any other language that I need to learn to start developing such sites on Commerce Cloud, or is it only Salesforce?
You actually don't need to know Salesforce to learn B2C commerce development. That's again a misconception that a lot of people have. You need to be very strong in JavaScript. You need to know Node.js, and then since a commerce site is all about the user experience, so you need to be very good with the front end typical front end skills like HTML, CSS, JavaScript frameworks. That is the primary skill that you need to be a B2C
Right,
commerce developer.
right. We have a question around the payment gateway because I think you mentioned about it in your merchant tools around integrating payment gateway. So is that something managed within Salesforce, or is it external payment providers that can
Yeah,
be integrated?
that's a great question. So typically you would integrate with a payment gateway, and the good thing is that we have a concept of cartridges and plugins. So if you search for Link Marketplace, and if I can hopefully show this quickly, you will find a number of cartridges and plugins that you can use for commerce. So pretty much all major payment gateways like Visa, MasterCard, you will be able to find that they have published their cartridges on this particular site. So for example, if I were to go here and if I come to payment, you should be able to see that there are a number of payment gateways that you can integrate with. The slide is a little bit slow for some reason, but yeah, the idea is if you want to see what are the gateways, so for example, Aiden, Affirm, Amazon Pay, pretty much all the standard gateways are supported. Rupesh, shall we move on to the next question? I see a lot of
Yes,
questions.
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. So the another one is around does Commerce Cloud supports multi-currency and how to configure it?
It is supported, but again, you need to be very sure of the use cases. So for example, what typically happens in case of Commerce Cloud versus a classical Salesforce implementation is, for example, if I were to give you an example of Puma. So for example, if Puma is launching a site in India, they would typically do it something like a puma.in versus if they are launching a site in China. So it would be something like, let's not talk about China, but puma.cn, and then similarly for other sites. And typically you would want the e-commerce transaction to be in the native currency. So multi-currency is supported, but it is not a very common scenario in that sense for localized sites. If you have a site, for example, which is somewhere in Europe, say Spain, and it is shipping products all over the world, then potentially you want that option to be available there. But again, even in those cases, you would want your payment gateway to handle all the currency conversions. So theoretically, it's possible. I've seen implementations where you can typically get an option of choosing your currency, but Commerce Cloud sites, a lot of them are localized to your native currency.
Right. Next one is, do I need to have like one site per org, or can I have multiple sites per org?
You can have multiple sites per org. That's a very common scenario.
Okay. Can we change the UI templates easily in Commerce Cloud like the way we do in WordPress, Magento, and Drupal?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a good question. So yes, you can do that. There is a tool called Page Designer. I think I've run out of time for a demo, but yeah, if you search for Commerce Cloud Page Designer, you will be able to find a number of tutorials, and it works exactly the same way as a drag and drop tool for any other e-commerce framework was. So you can drag and drop elements there, and you can create content slots, you can create content areas, and you can fill in those content areas with images, with text, with banners, anything that you want to do.
Okay. Throw some lights around Commerce Cloud with Einstein. I see a couple of questions on that space. So how to get started on using Commerce Cloud with Einstein?
Yeah, so once you are in your sandbox, there is actually an option on search recommendations on how you can actually use Einstein. So one way is that you can configure your search recommendations manually. And again, there is a lot of documentation available on this. If I have that site open, I can potentially show it quickly. Yeah, so this is the portal, developer.commercecloud.com. And here you will be able to find a lot of information. So this is the equivalent of developer.force.com, but specifically for the Commerce Cloud world. So the short answer is that Einstein for your recommendations is enabled on your sandbox, and you can actually configure it, and you can see how it impacts your recommendations versus how if you are using manual recommendations.
Awesome. So this was kind of a rapid fire section. We almost took around 15 to 20 different questions. I think in the interest of time, I'll let the pending questions shared with you in an offline mode, Gaurav, and you can probably tweet them out with your answers, or publish a blog or through your LinkedIn channel, right?